Hello everyone, welcome back to the Swift Academy. Today we are trying to solve another LeetCode problem. It categorized as easy problem, but it has a lot inside it. It is related to the linked list, how we connecting nodes together, and then we are trying to reverse those nodes to connected in the reverse mode. So let me just refresh your mind and talk about what the linked list is. Then we are coming back to solving this problem. So just imagine that you are going to having a list of some data. For example, now we are trying to have a list of numbers here. The easiest way to do that, we put them inside one array, and it will be going to occupy the portion of the memory inside the hardware, and then you will have a list of integers or any kind of the objects or strings that you need to. But is there any other way to representing the object a list for that? Yes, they are trying to use the linked list for that. One of the best beneficial thing about the linked list heavily using in the games, because for example, just imagine that you have a dice and put getting a number and then trying to move the player to the next step, the next place by the number that it has. You can just simply follow the pointers to the each square and put the player inside that. So it is heavily using inside the game industry. I'm just trying to show you how we can represent the data with the linked list now. Just imagine each square or each box here as an object that has its own value, and also it has another thing inside it, we call it as a pointer, that's referencing to the another object. For example, 1, the object 1 has a reference inside it to the next one. The next object is 2, and the 2 has another reference to the 3, and then another one to the 4. And at the end, 4, because it doesn't have any other thing after it, it has nothing inside as a reference, and the pointer will be nil. And the beginning of that, you see that there isn't anything to point at, so we always call it the head. And at the end, because there isn't any other object that referring to that, we call it as a tail. So we have a consisting of data that pointing to each other with these kind of the pointers that actually pointing to the next object. When we're trying to solve a problem like that, reversing a linked list, it is just simply obvious for us now. We have to just reversing all the pointers here to the another direction. It means that the object 4, the next one should be 3, the next one for the object 3 should be 2, and the next one for the object 2 should be 1. So with all that said, let's jump back to the question and trying to solve the problem. When we want to reverse a linked list, we just have to reversing the each pointers. So for example, from here at the last, we just have the 4 object, and then we should just change the pointer to the 3, 3 to the 2, and 2 to the 1, and the 1 should be point to the nil. It means that it is now the tail, it is the end of the object. How we gonna to achieve that? We just keep the referencing of each next and each object, current object. For example, 1, it's now our current object, and the nil behind the 1, it's going to be the previous one, previous object, and always we have to keep reference of the next object. So if we just keeping those in mind, that playing with the previous one, the current object, and the next object, and trying to reversing them by pointing them to another one, it will be reversing whole the linked list together. Now we are trying to reversing the object one. The previous one is the nil, and the next one should be nil because of that. So when we are going to reverse that, the current object is now 1. So the current dot next is now equaling to the previous one. The previous one is nil now, and then we have to change the previous one to the current object because now we are moving along with that. But before we changing the next one of the current, we have to keep a reference of the next value, and we keep trying to keep those objects together and changing them. Now after we changing the current dot next to the previous one, now the previous one should be 1 here. We change the previous one to the 1. The current now is equal to the 2. So, and the next one is now here, 2 to the 3. So the current dot next, when we going to equal it to the pre, it means that we put it to the 1, we equal it to the 1 object because we change the direction. We are going to do it to the end of the list, and when we are at the end of the list, we have just the previous one, and the current one is going to be nil. But when we are reaching to the end, we just simply can returning the previous one, which is 4, because the previous one will be our head in that case. So we're just playing the previous one, the current one, and reversing all the pointers together. And at the end, when we reach to the end of the current one, because it's going to be nil, we just simply returning the previous one as our head to that question. At the top of the class, at the top of the solution, usually they are going to give you the node class for you. They are providing it because with that you are going to find out what is the values, what is the object name for the next pointer, what is the object name for the value, and even how you can initialize a node for yourself. So just look at that and trying to solve the problem. Always in the linked list they will give you the head and ask you to do something with that or with the linked list, because you don't really need the other part. If you have the head, because the head already have the next object and the next object has its own next pointers, you can access to the entire linked list together. So with all the description that we described before, when we are trying to solve this problem, we have to keep a reference of our node, our current node class. So I'm defining a variable here as a current node, and the current node, it should be the type of our node class. As you can see, it provided to us the node class name is the list node. I'm using the same thing here, and we imagine that it should be optional because sometimes the head gonna be nil as well. So the current node will be head at the beginning. I'm equaling to the head. Then the other thing that we need, the previous node object, I'm going to define it as a list node again, and it should be nil as well because at the beginning the previous node it is nil. And also we need another object here as a next node. I'm calling it next node. It is the type of the list node too, and it should be nil at the beginning as well. When we are trying to iterate through the whole the linked list, it means that while the current node it's not nil, so simply we can use a loop called while, and if our current node is not nil, it means that we are not reaching at the end of the linked list. we are still have something, because we always trying to change our current node and we are assigning it to the next one. So while the current node is not nil, the thing that we have to do after that, just keep the reference of our next node. So our next node is going to be equal to our current node, and because it will be optional, we have to put the optional mark here and putting the next. Where is the next coming from? If you just see the main class that it provided to us, it's saying that we have an object inside our list node as the next. So the next node equal to the current node dot next. And then the other thing that we have to do now, we have to put the next pointer of the current node to the previous one, and the previous one of the one we define it as a nil right now because it should be nil. So the current node dot next is now equal to the our pre node, and after that we have to changing our pre node. So we are going to move along to the list. The previous node is now should be our current node. So the pre node equal to the current node. And then the last thing that we have to do is that we have to move our current node, because the previous node is now 1, but how about the current node? We keep the reference of the next one here because we want to move to the next object. The current node is now equaling to the next node, and when we reaching at the end of our list, the current node going to be nil, and we are going to exit the while loop from here, from this point. When we are reaching to the end, the head that we have to returning back here is going to our previous node, because the current node is now nil and the head is now 5 because we change the direction here to the 4. If you can see here, the direction of the next one of the 5 is now 4. So now we can simply return the previous node. But let's see what will be the edge cases. At the beginning, maybe the head itself or the whole linked list is gonna to be nil. So we can simply put a guard here. Guard let head equal to the head. It means that if it isn't nil, otherwise we can just simply returning nil here. It means that at the beginning we don't have any list here. The head itself was nil. And one more thing here. What about if we just have one head and we don't have other pointers? There is just one linked list. In that case, we just checking the next of the head if it is nil or not. If it is nil, it means that we can just simply returning the head, because there isn't any other pointer, any other object after that. It doesn't matter to reverse it in the other side or in another way, so it always will be the head itself. So if head dot next is equal to the nil, we are going to just simply returning head itself. Always during your interviews, first of all, solve the problem and then trying to find the edge cases and describe it with your interviewer. It will be help you a lot. Now with all that said, we already solved this problem with even covering 2 edge cases. Please subscribe this channel and like this video if you want to see more interview questions. See you next time.